Hello, everyone. Welcome to my Humankind Ancient Era tier list. So, before we begin running down the cultures, to give you a brief disclaimer about the Neolithic era. So, humankind is anachronistic in the sense that it offers a Neolithic era, which is not the norm among most 4X grand strategy games, notably Civilization 6, starts you off in the Ancient Era. And this Neolithic era is very important for collecting resources in the form of a population like this, or setting up outposts, or getting your Neolithic legacy trait. So in humankind, there are 7 eras, 6 plus the Neolithic era, and in each era you can accrue a legacy trait. The Neolithic era, you accrue that legacy trait by getting 10 science and getting your knowledge star. This is in normal speed, and slow speed I think is 14, and it differs based on which speed type you choose. But yeah, let's get our last science. Okay, and to select our legacy trait. Not this. Let's just talk to them. A tribe's legacy. Okay, so a tribe's legacy offers you 3 choices: Waddle and Daub, which gives you +1 industry per pop on city or outpost; plant lore, which gives you +1 food per pop on city or outpost; and astronomy, which gives you +1 science per pop on city or outpost. Okay, start with Waddle and Daub. There are use cases for Waddle and Daub, and the most important of which is if you're playing a science culture, like the Babylonians, who generate a lot of science and food, but lack industry. The Babylonians make a lot of food. That food can churn population. Population can then be used to create industry through Waddle and Daub. Another use case might be the Sumerians, who are a sciencey civilization and have small bonuses towards making farmers' quarters as well. They might benefit a lot from Waddle and Daub to create a source of industry. But most often you want to settle with astronomy and storytellers, because +1 science per pop on city or outpost is a lot more valuable than the other two. Food and industry can both be gained through settling land, but science is still a semi-rare resource, even until the medieval era, for that matter. So you really want to pick science where you can get it, and astronomy, because science is more valuable on a 1-to-1 ratio compared to food or industry. You really want to edge towards astronomy in most cases, unless you're picking a culture that already offers you science and food, for that matter. And now to address plant lore is not that powerful of a legacy trait, because the average population in humankind consumes 8 food per turn. I think it's 8 or 6. And so +1 food in return is just not a lot of bang for your buck. And even if you're doing a sort of horde rush strategy of just churning out cheap units, still I think you might be better off with Waddle and Daub to make those units faster. So, in humankind, I think especially into the later game, science is the most powerful yield, and then industry, and then food. And so I really do think that storytellers and astronomy should be your go-to in most cases. Okay, and now to run through some cultures. Okay, start off with the order the game gives it to us in. The Bantu. The Bantu really leaves something to be desired. Harmonious amalgamation, while it sounds very cool, is not that strong. +2 influence per each adjacent empire on territory is not very good if you're in an expansions affinity who wants to conquer all your neighbors. The Mupia field would be much better if it actually gave food and industry, but giving only food, it just isn't as powerful as other emblematic districts in this era. The Bagandi Pioneers are actually the best part of this kit. They allow you to collect these pioneer curiosities and multiply your armies really quickly. But even then, 13 combat strength is not a lot. Take it to even the Assyrians is 21 combat strength. You're getting diffed by almost an era if you pick the Pioneers. You're going to need a lot of Pioneers to make this happen. So it's just an inefficient way of doing things, sort of quite antithetical to the slash and burn farming they're showing here in the card. But the Bantu really leave something to be desired and aren't as powerful as I would like them to be. But yeah, now to pull up our tier list, I think the Bantu are genuinely a mediocre culture. I don't think they have a lot of upsides. I think the Bagandi Pioneers might push them into okay situational, but just that terrible legacy trait and the mediocre emblematic district, I think, hold them back significantly. Okay, And now on to our next culture, the Assyrians. The Assyrians used to be much worse, but now they're much better. +1 land movement speed. People discount this part of the legacy trait, but this doesn't just take part whenever you're moving across the larger map. It also applies in the little mini battles that you do in Humankind whenever two units interact. That +1 land movement speed makes the average unit's movement go from 4 to 5, which can be quite clutch in a battle, allowing your unit to maneuver around the enemy and get rear attack bonuses, or to take the high ground first, things of that nature. +5 combat strength when ransacking used to be, or it still is, it's not very good. I hope that with the next update coming in the coming months, I believe that the devs said it's going to come sometime early next month. I really hope that with that update and the introduction of the plundering mechanic, plundering trade routes, I really hope this becomes better as legacy trade. But it's good. It still is good. And I have great hopes for the Assyrians to get better in the future as well. The Danu is really strong. It gives you 3 influence, which is a not insignificant amount of influence in this era, and it double counts as a garrison and a commons quarter. Why that matters is that there is a civic called Fundamental Values, which allows you to choose between -50% on commons quarter industry cost, public happiness, or -50% on garrison industry cost, public security. This allows you to churn out really cheap garrisons or commons quarters, but the problem is the pre-requirement for this trait, for this civic to unlock, is having built 3 commons quarters, and commons quarters only unlock in the classical era, and so it takes a long time to get that civic online, and the Assyrians can get you there really early, which I think it gives them high marks in my opinion. The Raiders are a really great unit. The Pillager bonus really ties in really well with the Raid Masters. And the Syrian Raiders are a really scary unit because they're really cheap to produce. They only cost 1 horse, which is anachronistic of most cavalry units in this era, which cost 2 horse and 1 copper. And they have pretty good combat strength. Up to 26 combat strength when they're ransacking. So Assyrians are a really good culture, and the entire kit is really synergetic. Do they lack industry or science bonuses? Yeah, but they are really good at what they do, which is war, which is administration, using their commons and garrison quarters, and getting a non-insignificant amount of influence in the process. But yeah, let's rate them. To bring over our tier list, I think the Assyrians are our first okay situational culture. They aren't necessarily good. I think they're diffed by like the harappans or the mycenaeans or the zhou, but I think in their own niche they perform well. And if you're intending on going on a ransacking build, because there are cultures later in the game that also give you more bonuses to ransacking, like the Norsemen for instance, if you intend to do a ransacking build, these guys are a must pick. But yeah, next to the Babylonians. There is a lot of debate in the community as to whether Brilliant Philosophers is good in the mid-game. The fact is, it isn't. It isn't. It isn't good in the mid-game. It definitely isn't good in the late game, but it's good in the early game. It gives you +2 science per research tech, which means you can really storm through the ancient era tech tree. But look, I think the fact is that Brilliant Philosophers gets you a non-random amount of science on each research tech and allows you to rickroll through that tech tree, which I think is valuable in the ancient era. That in conjunction with their astronomy house, which gives you +3 science per adjacent farmer's quarter. The Babylonians really, the strategy with them is twofold. First, their unique emblematic unit is good. It's good. It's not bad, but you don't want to be building this. This is mostly good for defending against like a Syrian raider or a Gigir if it comes up. Most of the time, you want to be jumping into the next era because they have foresight. You can research +1 era, and you want to get to swordsmen before your enemies, and essentially swordsman rush people that are still in the ancient era. That is the goal with the Babylonians. And the second part of that plan is with the astronomy house. The astronomy house gives you +3 science per adjacent farmer's quarter. The problem, though, with the Babylonians is that they don't have any industry bonuses besides maybe wattle and daub. So I've seen it take 6 to 7 turns to build these things, which is ridiculous. So if you're going to go for the Babylonians, your strategy ought to be to settle outposts close to where these territories merge with one another, and to put one astronomy house here, one astronomy house here, and then a couple of farmer's quarters around that to minimize the amount of farmer's quarters you have to build and maximize maximize the science yield you're getting in return. That's sort of your strategy with the Babylonians, to minimize the amount of excess quarters you have to build because you lack the industry bonuses, and then to rush into swordsmen. But to rate them, I think they are again an okay situational culture. I think they're better than the Assyrians, but not by an awful lot. Because if you know what you're doing with the Assyrians, you are a force to be reckoned with. But yeah. Next, the caralans. I love the caralans. I think they're an amazing culture. Cooperative spirit, I think, is really amazing. +1 food on farmers' quarter per adjacent farmers' quarter. +1 industry on make quarters per adjacent, etc., etc. It is a great emblem, a great legacy trait. Just building 3 maker quarters in a triangle can net you in excess of 6 industry, because each maker quarter in that triangle is adjacent to 2 other maker quarters. So +2, +2, +2. Cooperative spirit is really, really good. And ceremonial plaza really complements their weaknesses, because ceremonial plaza gives you faith, and faith is a very good tool in the early game because faith allows you to select powerful religious tenets which can aid you in the mid to late game. So ceremonial plaza is really strong. It gives you a smattering of faith, which allows your religion to get off its knees, and not to mention it also acts as anchoring. Ceremonial plaza, of course, can only be placed next to coastal waters and lake. However, it allows construction of new districts on adjacent tiles, and it exploits food, industry, money, and science. Hamlets, which are only unlocked in the medieval era, only are anchoring and only exploit food and industry. This thing exploits all 4 and gives you faith per adjacent district. It's amazing. If you have a small amount of coastal tiles like I have in this area, it's amazing because you can settle an outpost over here and build a bunch of make quarters over here, and then you can settle an outpost. You can settle a ceremonial plaza right here next to the ocean, and then build a bunch of make quarters over here. So you basically have 2 areas to build, and build these what I call runways of maker quarters, where you build make quarter, maker, and just have this huge 7 set of maker quarters right here, which all adjacency off one another using the caralans as trait, and create bonkers amounts of industry or food or science or money, really whatever you desire with the caralans because of their versatility. They're, of course, the first builder culture we've seen thus far, so they have the landraiser affinity. Landraiser affinity, I think, is one of the best affinities in this era, second only to the aesthete affinity, because it allows you to convert all your money and science into industry, which is extremely powerful, especially in this part of the game. You can just build and build and build. This is, of course, in contrast to the scientist affinity, which converts all of your industry and money into science. This is markedly worse compared to the landraiser affinity, because this leaves your cities exposed because you're only doing science. You lose the capacity to build anything, which means that you are very vulnerable. Which means until you get those swordsmen and you rush people, you are vulnerable to getting murked as the Babylonians. So I'd watch out for that. But the landraiser affinity is really good for just building and building and building. Long story longer, the healers are not that good. The plant lore only provides a +5 flat bonus towards healing. It's not very good. I wish the healers were a ranged unit. They're not. So, I wouldn't build them. Just build warriors instead. But these 2 and the trait make up for it very much. And I think caralans are definitely a good culture. I think they are definitely a very, very, very good culture in Humankind. And definitely my favorite in this era. Okay, next culture, Egyptians. The Egyptians once again share the same pretty strong builder affinity bonus, or action rather, landraiser. Grand Planners is really good. +1 industry on top producing industry and -10% district industry cost is amazing, because it's like a mini Pyramid of Giza. Pyramid of Giza, the best wonder in the game, -25% district industry cost. Grand Planners provides you a mini Giza, which is great. The pyramid used to be much better. It got nerfed a lot. Now it's only +2 industry per adjacent make quarter. It used to be +3, which markedly weakened the pyramids' strength. But it does produce influence, so it's not just single-sided. And the Markabata is a good unit. It's very good, and it's strong even into the classical era. It's move and fire, so you can move into someone, attack, and then move out of the way and kite people effectively. Egyptians are a great culture, and I think they are once again a good culture. But I think you have to be careful with the Egyptians. I think they suffer from the common vice of players to double focus at the same yield. A lot of players settle, well, I've seen newer players settle these 2 food, 19 industry outposts, and I used to do the same thing too. And then you pick the Egyptians and double down on that. The problem is that humankind is not civilization. You cannot churn out military units just for free, basically, as long as you have the industry. In humankind, it requires population to be converted into units. And every time you convert pop into units, you lose that population out of your city, which means the population is no longer generating influence for you. So you have to be very careful with population in the ancient era. And the Egyptians, if you're going to pick them, you have to be very careful. You have to settle a high food area so you can actually, have a civilization and not just a bunch of strip mines in a desert, basically. So be very careful with the Egyptians, but they're still a very good culture. And I know I'm going to take a lot of heat for this, but in my opinion, I think the Caralans are slightly better than the Egyptians. I think the Caralans are more versatile than the Egyptians. So I'm putting the Egyptians behind the Caralans. Okay, next culture, the harappans. This is a great culture. Fertile inundations is an excellent trait. +1 food on tile producing food, +1 food on river. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Because food makes pops, and pops makes influence, and influence is the principal yield of the ancient era for making outposts in cities and things of that nature. Canal network, great emblematic district. It's considered as a river, so it has good synergy with the legacy trait because it generates an extra 1 food for being a river. This pairs up really well with the medieval era Khmer, because the Khmer generate extra industry per adjacent river on their emblematic district, the beret. So it pairs up really well with them. You just get infinite population, and in the classical era, you convert that all into legionnaires with the Romans or immortals with the Persians, and you shitstomp people. That's basically the strategy. The runners are amazing. The runners are the substitute for the scout in this era, which means the second you level up from the Neolithic era and you go into the ancient era, right after the Transcendence, all of your Neolithic tribesmen will become runners, which means on a 1-for-1 basis, you'll be more powerful than scouts, which means you can bum rush people with runners. It is a strategy that's worked for me in the past, so do keep that in mind. Harappans, great culture, great yields, really nothing to say wrong about them. I think the Harappans are really strong, and I think they are... I think they are behind the Caralans in that they're so one-dimensional with food. Because I've played games with the Caralans where I've generated upwards of 400, 500 industry before leaving the ancient era because I have these make-a-quarter runways. So I think they're behind the Caralans, but I think they're still a really, really, really amazing culture. Their affinity... Their affinity ability, greener pastures, I don't think is that strong. It allows you to lure population from neighboring civilizations using influence. You mostly want to use influence for other things, like settling outposts maybe. So it's not very useful, but still it's there if you want to, piss off your opponent. Hittites. Hittites are like the Assyrians' younger brother in that every part of their kit is lacking compared to the Hittites' kit. Sure, the militarist affinity bonus vigilance is really strong, but arguably the Assyrians' bonus trespassing is much more useful for a sort of ransack and burn culture, because you can ransack, burn their outpost, annex it, and keep moving. So I think the Assyrians, the package, work much better as like a cavalry raiding culture compared to a cavalry attack culture. Where are they? With the Hittites, yeah. Lust for War is great. Pasang unit, it's not bad. This part, the food, industry, and science and money per each owned city, per each occupied city, creates a weird sort of incentive to like occupy cities, but not like end the war with the war resolution, which is kind of odd because you kind of want to end the war and administrate on those cities. So it's kind of a weird anti-synergy where like you want to keep like sustaining war weariness to have the extra science, food, and industry, especially the science and industry. The Awari is like not great. Sure, it's a land spawn, but it's just like basically like a garrison. That's pretty much it. It's pretty much like an outpost garrison. It's an outpost garrison which makes money. Pretty much it. Um, fine. The Gagir is really strong though. Suppression is the best. That's why I think the Awari is so weak because the Gagir is so strong. The Gagir is the best. Gagir has the best unit trait in the whole game, in my opinion. Suppression. Suppression is incredibly powerful. It blocks them from moving, and they have like 6 reduced combat strength. It's like incredibly powerful, and it's heavy cavalry, which means you can just like slam into people with heavy charge. 23 CS means it's the strongest base combat strength in the whole game. Best in the whole the ancient era rather. Hittites are good. If you really just like just running people down with chariots, Gagir is great. Hittites are great, but the rest of your kit is somewhat lacking. In exchange for the Gagir being so ridiculously powerful. I mean, you just add a bunch of battering rams to this thing. You know, put people under siege, raise the battering rams. I mean, you can conquer the whole continent with these guys and the Gagir. And now on to I forgot to rate them. The Gagir. The Gagir, I think they are okay situational. I think they're mediocre. I think that they're Gagir. Did I call them Gagir this whole time? Sorry. I mean, I might as well, because the Gagir is the only thing that's the sort of saving grace of this culture. But the Hittites are a good culture. But their saving grace is the Gagir, but nothing else really stands out besides the Gagir. The LT is lacking. The emblematic the LT is lacking, the emblematic district is lacking, the vigilance is not terribly useful for them. So I think they're mediocre, better than the Bantu, sure, but still mediocre. Next, on to the mycenaeans. I got a little excited about these guys. Mycenaeans are great. Most cultures either offer you, if you're a militarist culture, it usually offers you 20% industry reduction on unit, and if you're an expansionist culture like the Romans, you usually get like plus 50% experience in creating units. Mycenaeans get both, and oh my, do you get both. I mean, you make units cheaper, not that you even need the industry with the Cyclopean Fortress, but you also get really easy veterancy levels with brutal upbringing. The extra experience on creating units means you can easily get 1, 2, or 3 experience levels, 1, 2, or 3 veterancy levels on all your units, which means it's actually much stronger than the Hittites' bonus then, for that matter, on a pound-for-pound basis, even though it doesn't look like it. Cyclopean Fortress used to be much stronger. It used to be 15 stability at the beginning of the game, but now it's 5. It's still broken. It's a garrison, which means you can freely place it. And it's a Maker's Quarter, which means you can just find a bunch of mountains, place this bloody thing, and generate like 30 industry for free using a Cyclopean Fortress. I mean, it's just busted. Mycenaeans, and so I really think this is arguably one of the best cultures in the game, really. We've forgotten the Promo Choi. Not that I could ever forget. The Promo Choi are the ultimate, hitmen. These guys are 21 combat strength, and with Champion, they're 25 combat strength in the first round because they got an additional +4. These guys are complete bruisers. I mean, these guys, you just build 4 stacks of these things, and you can just bruise people and kill them so easily. And plus, they get easy veterancy levels, so they get to 26, 27 in the first round. Now you're like late classical era units, basically. So I mean, this culture is the ultimate package. You have so much industry, you can make units for cheaper, get easier veterancy levels, and you have a damn good unit. And their their vigilance bonus allows them to get even more war support during times of peace, which means you can get even more outposts from peace deals. This is an OP culture. Sure, do they not have like a state affinity for like infinite influence? Sure, but if you have any neighbors, it doesn't matter. You'll just take them. So that's definitely an OP culture. Now, Nubians. I like the Nubians, I do, but something always feels lacking about them. Golden Dreams is great. I always love the sort of the weird parallelism between the Australians, whose legacy trait is called Dreamweavers, and the Nubians, whose legacy trait is called Golden Dreams. But the Nubians have an amazing legacy trait, +5 money on luxury or strategic deposits. It's a great tool if you have those deposits near you. No, I don't have them this game near me, so it wouldn't be very smart of me to pick the Nubians because I only have a couple. But if you have a lot of deposits near you, I mean, I've seen on the natural spawn mode for resources, I've seen like 6 porcelain show up in the same territory. It's ridiculous. And so the Nubians can generate 30, 25, 30 food, 25, 30 gold, which is ridiculous. The Marrow Pyramids have an odd anti-synergy because they generate money per adjacent maker quarter. But I mean, they're dual quarters. They exploit both market quarters, they exploit both money as a market quarter, and they exploit industry as a maker quarter, which means they can exploit both the tile industry and the money that comes from the luxury resource tiles. I mean, it's great. Who doesn't love a double quarters? Dual quarters rather. The Tassetti Archer is amazing. Exceptional accuracy is a great trait. I think a lot of newer players have problems because they have archers over here, for instance, and they have a bunch of swordsmen over here, and they have a unit on the low ground, and they're trying to hit that unit with an archer, but then they don't realize that there's this weird sort of upcline and then decline. The archer can't see it, and it gets all murky in combat. But the Tassetti archers, you never have to worry about that. As long as it's within the set amount of tiles that its range is given, you can basically hit it. You don't have to worry about ups and downs and terrain modifiers and mountains. You don't have to worry about anything. So, it does simplify combat in that regard, but you definitely, 4 range, or 3 range rather, but you definitely do need screening units for this. You definitely need swordsmen or something like, warriors or spearmen to screen for this, or else they will be slaughtered, because they are vulnerable to close combat. But yeah, Nubians are great culture, good package. The merchant power investor is not that useful in the ancient era. Mediation, not that useful in the ancient era, because AI does not like to trade unless you're more powerful than them. But then, why would you trade, right? So, let's go back here. Nubians, okay situational, for sure. I think they are weaker than the Assyrians, Babylonians, but they're not terrible. If you have a lot of resources near you, they can be quite strong. So I think they are okay situational in every sense of that word. And now to go back to Humankind. Olmecs. This is our first affinity, Aesthete affinity. This affinity is broken, ELI 5, this affinity you can basically spend 30 gold in the ancient era and in exchange for like 650 influence. It's ridiculous. It's broken. Everybody knows it. It used to be like 1,200 influence. I think they nerfed it down to I think it's 300 in the ancient era, 650 in the classical era, something like that. It's ridiculous. All I know is you can get a free Pyramid of Giza and a free city and some more influence left over. And then in 10 turns, you can do it again. And then you can paint the map in your outposts, basically. I mean, it's ridiculous. It needs to be nerfed. It's ridiculous. And so the Olmecs are really good. The Aesthete affinity alone, I think, carries them. The natural harmony is good, 3 influence on territory. But it's nothing compared to the Aesthete affinity's influence. It's like 300 versus 3 influence. Olmec head is good. It generates all the right yields, influence and food. But it's not like a lot of it. The Javelin Throwers is amazing. They are an amazing unit. I have been with the Mycenaeans and fought these guys and been absolutely destroyed. Because the Mycenaeans lose their absurd combat strength after the first round, and these things can just sit in the forest and just gun you down with their javelins. So really watch out for these guys. They are quite powerful militarily as well. So I think the Olmecs are a really powerful culture. It's kind of odd because the Aesthete affinity generates a lot of influence, but it doesn't count towards the influence star. So it's sort of odd because this natural harmony and the Olmec head's influence counts towards the star, as does the population influence. But the Aesthete affinity's influence doesn't count towards the star, the Aesthete star, which is kind of odd. It makes me think it's kind of a bug that just kind of got accepted by the devs as being is what it is. So, yeah, I don't really know, but enough conjecture from me. I think the Olmecs are easily S tier. Better than the Mycenaeans because they definitely do have enough combat strength to fight the Mycenaeans, but they just have so much influence. They can get Giza for free, which means easier, faster districts, so really nothing to complain about with the Olmecs. And the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians have a great trait, trading pioneers, +2 money per trader. That's okay. The better part is the Indus with the combat strength on naval unit and the combat strength and the movement speed bonus on the naval transport. This synergizes really well with their unique unit, the Byreme, which is a naval transport, which allows your land units to embark onto the ocean. One era earlier, because the classical era is where the first land transports get naval transports get unlocked. So if you have a continent close by with like maybe 1 or 2 turns of open water, you can't jump it with the Phoenicians because they have faster movement on the water, +1 movement, and the Byremes have pretty decent movement as well, 2 movements. So you get 3 movement on the water with a land unit as a naval transport. So if you have a close by continent, you can jump it. So it could be pretty useful if you have a close by New World or something like that. Phoenicians definitely pretty good, especially on coastal maps. And I hope even better after the next update, which introduces more naval units and more naval trade routes and things of that pedigree. Haven, great, nothing to say wrong there. Food, money per adjacent coastal water. It dual counts as a farmers and a market quarter, which means if you have a market quarter on land and then a haven on the coastal water, they both get additional yields off of that because market quarters get an additional yield off of nearby harbors. Great. Mediation, power investor, but good culture overall. Phoenicians, I'll have to put them, I think they're definitely okay situational. They're not as good as the Nubians because the Nubians can operate anywhere as long as there's enough resources. These guys definitely require ocean next to you to work, for sure. And yeah, let's go back. Sumerians. Okay, so I have some hot takes about the Sumerians and the diplomat affinity in general. I think diplomat affinity is really bad. I think leverage is a bad mechanic. I think it's onerous, it's tedious. I don't think it offers you enough. I think the fun to utility ratio there is really whack. Like it's not a lot of fun and it's not a lot of utility either. Leverage. The AI just uses it to build embassies and placate you and lower your war support. But you end up winning the war anyway, so it doesn't really matter because your enemy's going to force surrender. By that time, you're going to have 100 war support and he's going to have 0. So it's like, what's the point? You know, diplomat affinity is not very good. The demilitarization is okay, but like ideally you want to be fighting offensive wars. If you're fighting defensive wars, something is very wrong with your game. Big Brother is decent, but agents are not even that good. And sure, they can collect leverage and spy and stuff, but like both not very good mechanics. Citadel of Alamut completely destroys the spy masters and spies as well. So, I mean, what are you gonna do? Learn Edition is not very good either. Unless you're going to go for some like one city strategy, it's just not very good. The Ejuba, though, is the silver lining to a very dark cloud. Disregard the whole leverage stuff. 2 science base and 6 science per adjacent main plaza or administrative center. That's 8 science plus 1 per adjacent farmer's quarter. That's pretty good. And it exploits science. So the Ejuba, I think, is really good and I think is the best part of a relatively weak culture. Because 8 science, 9 science is nothing to scoff at per district in the ancient era. And only one culture, our next one, can hold a candle to that. The Agaush are incredible. A stack of 4 of these has 24 combat strength and their anti-cav, which is really incredible. So, you know, really good culture. Really good cultural unit. Not a very good culture. I think the Sumerians are definitely situational. I think they're better. I don't know. I find difficulty placing. I feel like this has become a big tier, and for good reason. I think it's good for a lot of cultures to be okay and situational, so you can play them in different games. I don't think it's good for the game to have too many OP cultures, especially because AI moved through the eras so slow that you end up getting to pick every OP culture in every era, and the game just becomes pointless at that point. But still, I do think that the Sumerians, I do still have a difficult time placing them. They're worse than the Babylonians, for sure. Worse than the Assyrians, for sure. Worse than the Nubians, for sure. Okay. They're just the worst, okay? They're the worst in the situational tier. Just simply because the affinity leaves something to be lacking, and even then the legacy trait isn't even good enough to make up for that. So, yeah, I don't think they're very good, besides the Ejuba and their Agaush. And last, but most certainly not the least, we have the zhou. They share the Olmecs' insane cultural blitz. But harmonious thought is also insane. Plus the stability on district means that you can build 20% more districts while tanking the same stability cost. It's incredible. Each maker mark quarter only loses 8 stability, not 10. Incredible. Confucian School. It gives you 8 stability base, which means the Confucian School alone gives you 8 plus 2, 10 stability base, which means you can afford to build a Confucian School and then additional maker quarter and then half of another maker quarter before you even begin to tap into your stability reserve, which I think is just bonkers. Confucian School, if you have more than just a few mountains near you, suddenly becomes even more overpowered with an adjacency bonus that we haven't seen in the game thus far. I think it's the highest adjacency bonus in the whole game, plus 5 per adjacent mountain. Given mountains are markedly more rare than like other districts, for instance, but still, I mean, Confucian School is really good. It exploits science, so even if you don't have any mountains, you can have the +1 base science, and you can exploit a horse for like 3 science. The Zalanchi is really powerful, given it is resource hungry, but if you have the resources, I mean, this thing really steamrolls, especially because you are going to have high stability all the time. And high stability means your pops are making influence. Not that you even need it. You have cultural blitz, but yeah, I want to stop talking about this culture. This culture is ridiculously broken, and there's really sort of no counterplay to this in the ancient era. And so if I'm going to rate this culture, I think everybody is here and the zhou are up here. But for the sake of this video, I'll put them over here. But yeah, I think this is my rating for the ancient era. I know there'll be some people who disagree with me, and feel free to put it in the comments. I read everything that goes down there. I think the biggest disagreements will be with like where I place maybe the Bantu or the Caralans or perhaps the Egyptians. But I'm always open to your feedback, and I'd love to talk to you in the comments. But yeah, this was my Humankind Ancient Era tier list, and I look forward to making the next one. Bye bye.
The